Can we have a man-to-man talk today? I mean, ladies, we're going to let you listen in on this. But can we be transparent with each other? I mean, like brutally honest with each other, and especially with ourselves. I guess I'm asking today, can we discuss what an authentic man looks like? You need to know that the home and the workplace and the community is deficient in real men. I mean, I don't mean there's not necessarily one there, but in our world, in our nation, so many homes where there may be a man there, but he's not there. 1 Corinthians 16 and 13, we're going to bring this phrase out. Be on the alert, stand fast or stand firm in the faith, and act like men. Literally, that's what it would translate into. Some of you, it may be bold or courageous or something like that, but it literally, act like men, be strong. It's as if Paul is telling the Christians at Corinth to behave in such a way that was characteristic of real men. That is, not to be immature, but to be courageous and convicted inside of a pagan society. So this morning, for the few minutes that I have with you, I want to take full advantage of this phrase, act like men. And I want to investigate today what it means to live like a real man. Brant Henson, in his book, The Men We Need, describes the 2019 Gillette commercial, the razor. The voiceover says, "Is this the best a man can get?" The ad showed men behaving badly, preying on women, acting like bullies. The ad continues saying, "Things are changing. There will be no going back. We believe in the best in men, to act the right way." It says some already are, but some is not enough. Because boys are watching. And the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow. The images illustrating in the right way theme of the commercial are men intervening to break up a fight, or stopping the other men from making women feel threatened. And there's a great image of a dad holding his little daughter in front of a mirror, telling her she's strong and having her repeat it, "I am strong." But listen again to the phrase. The boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow. If our lives and our homes are not protected, our influence is shot. If our lives and homes are not protected, we're not acting like real men. If our lives are undisciplined, lazy, apathetic, we're not acting like real men. Fellas, if we're feeling our hearts with images, videos, media that turn women into objects of lust, we're not acting like real men. This world is desperate for those who act like real, authentic men. I want to give you 7 qualities of what that looks like. Here's the first one. Real men take responsibility. In other words, we keep our word. Guys, we let our yes be yes and our no be no. Gentlemen, we take responsibility to intervene when the vulnerable among us are at risk. That's what men do. We step up and lead when no one else does. We say something when no one else will. Passivity is not in our DNA as mighty men of God. Mr. Henson, in that book, talked about his friends, Paul and Virginia, their PhDs and family counselors. He said these two said that passive men are a far more common problem in their practice than men who are overbearing, physically intimidating, or other usual things that we consider examples of toxic masculinity. Paul says, this friend that he has says, it can be benign or seem benign. A husband finds it easier to check out mentally and emotionally and concentrate on work, for instance. He just says, yes, dear, or something like that, just to keep the peace, but it winds up being the downfall of the home. Because he's not being responsible for what God has called him to do. And I'm here to tell you, nobody admires a passive man. You don't go, if you're a moviegoer, you don't go see a movie because the dude is passive. So we don't make excuses. We don't shirk our responsibilities. We don't put the blame on others and redirect our duties. We stay faithful in the little things. We step in. We are the ones who step in to take care of widows and orphans that are being neglected, like in Acts 6. They chose 7 good men. James chapter 1 and verse 27. We are those men. We stand up when someone's being mistreated or hateful to someone else. We protect the weak. We provide for our families and point others to Jesus because we are authentic men of God. We make choices that need to be made to keep God first because we are men who are responsible. Second of all, real men are not just responsible, but they lead their homes. Charles Swindoll, and I quote, "An unhappy home produces unbalanced children." And however idyllic the kingdom of David, his home was unhappy. He may have built an impressive legacy for Israel and expanded his realm beyond the dream of any other man. He may have been a brilliant battlefield commander, strategizing and mobilizing troops to win impressive victories. He may have been a man after God's own heart, penning prophetic psalms and composing melodies that prompt others to worship, but he could not lead his family in the way that he walked himself. And he says when he came to public accomplishments, he was successful. But when it came to his family, he was a failure. His home was so unhappy and his children so unbalanced that the dysfunctional fallout would keep a modern counselor busy for decades. Men, he says, I have little doubt that you are successful in building your career and having an impact on the professional world. That's impressive and gratifying, but let me urge you to pause and think. Are you cultivating a happy home? Is it a home that will produce fulfilled, well-balanced, godly men and women, end quote. Listen, men, someone's going to influence your children. It desperately, desperately needs to be you. You are called to lead your wives. You are called to lead your children. Your goal is to point them to eternity. Years ago, a lady called me out of the blue. She introduced herself because I didn't know her. She was the wife of a successful surgeon in Oklahoma City. They had a 5-year-old who desperately needed the love and the discipline and the care of his father, who was always at the hospital caring for other people. She said they got into a big fight about him being gone so much, and she tried over and over again to tell him how much this 5-year-old little boy needed time with him. And with arrogance in his voice, he said, he said to her, do you know how many women out there would die to be in the position that you are in with our lifestyle? I said, what'd you tell him? She said, you may be right, but I ain't one of those women. Brothers, your children would rather live with you in a rugged tent than without you in a beautiful mansion. You want to know what it means to act like men? Lead your homes. And love your wives. Number 3, like real men, sacrificially love their wives. It's what Ephesians 5 is all about. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Verse 28, so husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of that body. Steve Farrar, in one of my favorite books called Anchorman, says when a husband treats his wife in an understanding way, and when he grants honor to his wife, he's demonstrating for his children that he respects his wife. He values his wife. He cherishes his wife. He appreciates his wife. He protects his wife from those who would in any way depreciate her. He said, any man or a man rarely stands taller than when he stands for a lady, his lady. And then Farrar says he had a friend who recently bought his 17-year-old a truck. His son was making good choices in life. He wanted to be an encouragement to him and honor him, so he bought him a truck. That would have been nice, by the way. That didn't happen in my home. A few months later, the friend began to notice, Steve says, an attitude problem with his son. His son was beginning to act disrespectful toward his mother. He developed a cocky spirit, and even though the disrespect was subtle, it was clear to everyone that he didn't feel that it was important for a guy his age to obey his mother. And so his friend just decided to act swiftly and decisively. Calling his son to his room, he says, son, you know that I love your mother, but you need to know something else. I also like her, and I respect her. Oh, Dad, I like her and respect her too. Well, the way you've been acting lately, you've had a lot of us fooled. So let me tell you what I'm going to do. Up until now, you've made some very wise choices. That's why I gave you that truck. But if I don't see some immediate improvement in your attitude toward your mother, I'm going to ask you to hand over those keys to that truck. And remarkably, the son became a new man. His dad had drawn the line. And he knew that beyond a shadow of a doubt that dad would stand by his word. If you instill that kind of respect in your son, the woman that he marries will thank you for the rest of her life. For she's married a man who was taught what it means to respect a woman. Real men sacrificially love their wives. And real men control their passions and their emotions. 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 13, he starts out this way. Be on the alert. You better watch out. Satan's trying to get you this very moment, men. Do you know that? Satan is after you and your attention to distract you, to make you think about other things as if this lesson isn't for you. Be on the alert because you're being tempted. Be on the alert because of the lust and desire that attacks you every day. Men, we got to be like the Apostle Paul when he said in 1 Corinthians 6:12, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but I will not be mastered by anything. That's the spirit that real men... Ladies, I'm glad you're listening. That's the man you want to look for. That's the man you're after. A man who's on the alert for the lust and the passions that are always attacking him. The temptations. Oh, and then the emotions that come with being frustrated at times and being in seasons of the wilderness and things not exactly going your way or seem like seemingly everything against you. And it produces all of these things like anger and rudeness, harshness, impatience, hard-heartedness, resentment, and grudges. Tommy Bolt was known years ago on the PGA Tour for his beautiful swing and his legendary temper. He was conducting a golf clinic one afternoon for a group of business people who'd paid a bunch of money for tips from Bolt. Bolt was showing them how easy the mechanics were of the swing. And so to demonstrate, he turned to his teenage boy who was with him that day, and he said, "My son, imitate what I do for these gentlemen." So he took the 9-iron and he chunked it way out in the lake. It's funny, but it's not. Because our boys are watching. They're watching everything you do. From the way that you look at the woman across the street to the things that you're scrolling on your phone. They're watching you. And Colossians 3 says, as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion and kindness and humility, gentleness and patience. 1 Peter 1 says, I want your conduct to be holy in everything that you do because God is holy. This is very providential today of us being here. It always is. Nothing on accident this morning. I'm here to tell you that real men control themselves. I know we have a battle every day. I get it. I'm with you on that. I'm no better than you. I got that. Day in and day out, seeking to be more like Jesus and disciplined in all that we do. And I know I fail, and I know you fail. But what are you doing about it? Because real men have to get right back up and control those passions again to not be mastered by anything. Number 5, real men love Jesus and the church more than life itself. Men, we're called to have no other gods. Man, I love, and not the way I love my wife, but I'll tell you what, I love basketball. I truly do. But it's a terrible God. It's a horrible God. Some of you love hunting or playing a video game or throwing a ball or hitting a ball or catching something with a hook. Great. It's a terrible God, though. We're called to seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. Farrar also said that you cannot build a Christian family if you simply love God with half your heart. You can't be divided. You can't be double-minded. Wasn't it James who said that the double-minded man is unstable in all that he does? He goes on, you can't build a house on half sand and half rock. It has to be one or the other. You can't love God. You either love God, you either love Him from your gut or you don't. And if you're going to teach your children about God, you must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your might. As one man said, a man who knows his subject thoroughly, a man so soaked in it that he eats it, sleeps it, dreams it, this man can always teach it with success. And that's the way you need to be about Jesus. We choose to love the Lord because we love Him with all of our hearts. And when we love the Lord, I as a man, when I love the Lord with all of my heart, I love the church in the same way. That's what real men do. Number 6 this morning, real men, they practice what they preach. They don't tell their little boys one thing and their little girls one thing and then practice something else. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1, he told the church at Corinth, be imitators of me as I imitate Christ Jesus. Fellas, you need to be able to say that to your children. That you can walk like Dad walked. Even though I fall and falter, you can watch me get back up and repent and do it again. Imitate me as I imitate Christ Jesus. Small boy was consistently late coming home from school. His parents, mom and dad, they warned him, tomorrow afternoon, do not be late. Nevertheless, he arrived later than ever. His mom met him at the door and said nothing. Let him in. Dinner was served that night. The boy looked at his plate, slice of bread, glass of water. Looked over at his father's plate, meat, potatoes, and more potatoes. The boy was crushed. The father waited for the full impact to sink in, and then he quietly took the boy's plate, that empty plate, and he put it in front of himself. And he took his plate, and he put it in front of his boy, and he smiled at his son. When that boy grew to be a man, he later said, all my life I've known what God is like because of what my father did for me that night. The grace that he showed. I don't know that that's the way it ought to go, but I'm just telling you right now, whatever you're preaching, you can say it, and it means this much. Or you can live it, and it means everything. Because real men practice what they preach. They practice setting their minds on things above and not on things of the earth. They practice bouncing their eyes when something worthless comes in view. They practice walking in a manner worthy of the gospel with which they've been called, in all humility and gentleness and patience, showing tolerance for one another in love. They practice those things day in and day out, not giving up on them. They practice what they preach. And number 7, real men raise real men. Steve Farrar, one more time. A father sets the atmosphere for his child even when he isn't present. Guys, watch this. He sets the atmosphere for his child even when he isn't present. Imagine what a father could do for his children by setting an atmosphere of construction. An atmosphere where the children are built up rather than torn down. Because one day your children are going to leave home and establish their families. And your sons, guys, our sons are going to set the atmosphere for their homes. And we obviously want that to be an atmosphere of construction that's constructive. And so give them something to copy. Give them something authentic. Show your boys how to resolve conflict. Refuse to teach them only to explode and walk away. Show them that conflict doesn't have to destroy a relationship or a family. Show them how to listen and how to express their thoughts and their feelings instead of shutting down like a lot of men of the world do. A lot of Christian men do that. They just shut down. That's not what real men do. They isolate themselves. They virtually turn inward and pout for days. That's not what real men do. Teach them how to listen. Praise them. Encourage them. Give them blessings instead of a curse. This might be provocative for you. If you're interested in changing the world, how you vote in November ain't going to get it done. Doesn't matter if you're not being a real man. I don't care who you vote for. I don't care if you vote. I don't really care if you don't like that statement, actually. Because the end game is that I live my faith no matter how it goes in this country. That's the end game. Go vote. Good grief. If that hurt, I don't want to hurt your feelings too bad. But it ain't going to matter. In the end, it ain't going to matter if you're not being a real man. In the end, it's not going to matter if you're not giving our children, our boys, our girls, something to copy. Something that's authentic. Because right now, they're being fed heavy doses of evil and insanity, immorality, and confusion. And they need to see authenticity from you. So you, mighty man of God, show them the Father and invest in their eternal futures. And men, if you've lived a life of duplicity, two-faced, I challenge you to get real today.